G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac, where we teach you the basics of Swift in 10 minutes or less. Today's lesson is functions. So let's have a look at functions in 10 minutes or less. Functions form a critical part of the Swift programming language, in fact any programming language, and what a function is a small piece of code that does something. So to define a function, we use this func keyword. The function will have a name, it will have a list of parameters which could be empty, or it could be a variable length, or it could be a fixed length, and it has a return value which could be nothing or it could be something, and then between these two braces this is what the function actually does, the purpose of the function, and if it returns a value then it has a return keyword at the end or somewhere in the middle. So some functions have no parameters and then there's nothing placed between the parentheses. So this function, no params, doesn't have any parameters, but it still returns a string, and so this returns the string no params. Some functions have multiple parameters and parameter names need to be unique to the function. So this function has two parameters. First one's called parameter 1, followed by its data type, an integer. Second parameter is parameter 2, and it is also an integer, and this returns an integer, and it returns parameter 1 plus parameter 2. Some functions don't have a return value, they just do something. So this function, no return value, is just simply printing no return value, and there's no need to place an arrow or the arrow void to indicate in this function definition that there is no return. Functions can also have multiple return values, that is, they can return a tuple. So we have a function here, min-max, which takes an array of integers and it returns the minimum integer and the maximum integer as a tuple, and essentially it sets the minimum and maximum values at the start of the array, and then it iterates through every value in the array and calculates if there's a minimum value and a maximum value, and then it returns that minimum and maximum value. Now, note you can also return an optional tuple, as this example does not actually check that the array is not empty. So if an empty array was passed, this is going to crash. It would need a line at the top saying something if there was, if the count of the array was 0 to return nil, and in which case the formation of the array would include this optional return value placed here. Now, parameters can also have argument labels, so just to make things a little bit more confusing, this is an example here where there's the label from hometown and it's still returning a string, and we go returning hello the person, glad you could visit from hometown, which is the value, but when we actually call the function greet, we want to greet the person Bill from Cupertino. So it makes the reading of the function more sentence-like. Instead of saying greet person Bill hometown Cupertino, which sort of sounds like broken English, something that Yoda would say, it's more fluent. But apart from that, it doesn't really add any programmatic benefits. You can also omit a function, a function label by using the underscore character. So function, some function underscore, there is no label here, but the parameter name is the first parameter name and it's an integer. The second parameter name is also an integer. Now, if a function has a label, then you must, that is always, use the function label in order to call the function definition. Now, sometimes you want to set a default parameter value. So here we have a function, parameter without default is just an integer, and then a parameter with the default value is an integer, and then the equal sign of 12. So that's going to set that value to 12, even if the parameter is not provided. It's recommended that if you're going to use default parameter values, you place them at the end of the parameter list. That's because these values at the front tend to be more important than the default values that you're passing to the function. So you can also pass variadic parameter values. That is a parameter of the same type multiple times. So if we're looking at this example of the arithmetic mean, we're going to pass some numbers, and this ... says that there's going to be 0 or more doubles following, and it's going to return a double, and so essentially we need to create this for in loop to determine how many of these numbers variables have been passed to the function. We total them up and then we average them, and we return that average, which is of course the arithmetic mean. So in this example we're passing 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be iterated through 5 times and it will return 3, and in this other time we're only passing 3 values, and it comes up with 10 as the arithmetic mean, but it'll only iterate this 3 times. So parameters are normally defined as constants. So when you pass, so that means when you pass the parameters, they're passed by value to the function. If you want the parameters to change and persist once the function ends, then you need to define the parameters as in out. And so, for instance, if you want to swap these two variables a and b, then you need to define them as in out, and when the function or the function calling this function swap to ints is called, when it gets a and b back, they will have reversed their position due to the effects of the function. Sometimes you want to pass a function as a parameter type. It might be that the function you're passing is a return function that happens sometime in the future, or it's deferred, etc. But in that case, the syntax for that is to name the function like you would any other parameter, and then you pass the parameter list as data types and the return value as an int. And then that allows the function to be called math function with the parameter types just like it is here. Now, one thing you should be aware of is if you are passing the function and the function is void, that is, it has no return value, then you need to pass the arrow and the void statement as part of the abbreviated function definition. Now, you can return a function as a return type, but I do not recommend that. It's not very good programming practice at all. You're better off calling the other function, obtaining its value, and then returning that value. I hope that makes sense, but in any event, you can also nest functions within functions, and normally when you declare a function, it's accessible globally from without your code, but nested functions are only available within the function that defines it. Again, there are better ways of doing this to achieve the code protection, and I don't recommend the practice. It makes readability and reuse extremely difficult. But this is how you would do it if you so wanted to. These functions would only be callable by choose step function, and in fact, well, they are here, step forward and step back. Also an example of a returning function. Well, that's it for functions. If you have any questions about the tutorial, then please leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter @SwiftAlmanac. Please subscribe to the channel, it's free, and check out our website at www.swiftalmanac.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.